Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jason, how's it going tonight?
It's pretty good. Just doing another week of the podcast, and right before we hit the record button here, you and I noticed something, didn't we? A bit of a milestone we missed out on last week.
We did. I'm a bit embarrassed to say, but last week's episode was our 50th. We forgot to acknowledge that. So now that we're above the 50 episode mark, we can celebrate that fact. It's definitely a lot more than most startup podcasts get to. So kudos to us, I guess, for keeping it going for over a year now.
It's been a lot of fun. I'm enjoying doing it, and I read the stats at one point about the number of podcasts that make it past 10 episodes, and it's a relatively small number. So I think we've done all right.
And thanks to everybody who's been listening. I don't know if there are people who have listened to every single episode we've put out. No, if you've stuck with us throughout this endeavor of ours, we really appreciate it, and we hope you enjoy it.
Absolutely, and we appreciate any feedback, and we get messages from time to time from people, and it's fun doing this. It's also it's fun knowing that there are people out there that are enjoying it as much as we're enjoying doing it.
Right on. Well, I guess we should get into this week's episode, number 51. Jason, let's switch things up, and how about you explain, if you are a new listener, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
We focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from the city soccer community, all the way from the grassroots to the university and professional levels. How did you, Scott? Is that okay?
Yeah, well, I guess I've done it 50 times, and I kind of threw you under the bus there asking.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, this week we'll talk about Cavalry FC and talk about their match last week and their upcoming match. And we'll talk about the new high performance team in League One Alberta. But I think we actually have some relatively breaking news from today that maybe we want to start off with. What do you think, Scott?
Sure. So some hours back, earlier this afternoon, I saw that the University of Calgary Dinos men's team has hired their new coach. Obviously, Brendan O'Connell left in the spring, and we had speculated about who might be taking on that role. We found out today that Ramon Mifflin, who we recently had on the podcast, is going to be the Dinos' new head coach, which makes some sense, but I honestly wasn't expecting it. He had been at Mount Royal University for the better part of almost a decade, I think, in an assistant role. And it looks like he's switched allegiances in the university soccer scene in Calgary. What do you think of that appointment, Jason?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, but I think it's overall, it sounds like a pretty good hire to me. Definitely at this point, Blizzard and Dinos are very well aligned. You know, when you look at Diogo Raposo, who is the head coach of the women's Dinos team and really in charge of the women's program for Blizzard. And now you have Ramon Mifflin, who basically is in the same situation. He's the head coach of the men's Dinos team, and he's the head coach of the men's League One team, and pretty much one of the top people in regards to the men's program there at Blizzard. So they're pretty closely aligned now for sure.
Yeah. Ramon is a long-serving member of Calgary's soccer community. He was actually my coach for one season back in U18 when I went over to Southwest United. His Southwest United teams, the 1993 born boys teams, were really, really strong teams. I'm kind of surprised more of those players didn't go on to a professional career. I think the CPL just arrived a little too late for them, though. But yeah, I think they won provincials at every age group available at the time, U14, U16, and U18, and I believe did well at nationals too. So he has a ton of pedigree, ton of experience in the Calgary soccer community. Like you mentioned, he's been at Blizzard for a couple of years now, involved with MRU. So very strong appointment, and one that I think will be a good choice for the Dinos moving forward. I think he enjoys attacking football, and he comes from Peru. He played professionally there as well as, I believe, in the US. And like I mentioned, lots of pedigree as a coach. So excited to see how he gets on with the Dinos this fall.
Yeah, and there's nothing quite like having the assistant coach from the crosstown rivals come over to be the head coach. That'll juice that rivalry a little bit, I would think. I don't know if it's going to turn into like a bitter enemy type rivalry, but it does make it a little bit more interesting. I think, like I said, adds a little juice to it.
Definitely, yeah. When the Dinos take on the Cougars this September or October, and you've got Ramon and Ryan Jackie facing off, that'll be a cool storyline in and of itself.
For sure. Let's talk about last weekend. And Cavalry did the very long road trip out to Halifax and played the Wanderers. And in that match on Saturday afternoon, it ended up as a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I can't say that I watched this game in full, but from what I saw, it didn't look like a CPL classic. It was a pretty soggy looking pitch. Not the biggest crowd, which makes me think that the weather wasn't very great, but a point when you travel that far with a pretty high number of injured players or unavailable players, it's nothing to hang their heads about. But Halifax hasn't been having the strongest season. I think this might have actually been their first point of the campaign. So I imagine the Cavalry contingent will feel like they should have come away with a win there.
I think in the post-game press conference, Tommy Wilden Jr. said that, getting a point there is okay, but they felt that they played well enough to get the 3 points. And I would agree, because I did watch the game in its entirety, and I felt for large stretches of the game, in particular in the first half, it kind of almost looked like the Cavs were like toying with them. They had possession and they were kind of dictating everything that was happening out there. Maybe they didn't have tons and tons of pressure necessarily, but it just seemed like they were dictating the game and Halifax was reacting to that. And it seemed like they were generally in control for most of the match. And it did end up, being a 1-1 draw. But during most of the match, it seemed like the superior team were the Cavs. It was not the Wanderers.
Mm-hmm. I would give kudos to the Wanderers, though, for their goal, which was in the 78th minute. It was a really well-worked cross and header. I don't know much about goalkeeping. I was watching Cavalry's goalkeeper, who's making his debut, by the way. I was looking at him and wondering, like, could he have gotten a hand to that? But I don't know about like his footwork or his positioning at that moment. But yeah, the cross kind of came out of nowhere, and I can't even remember the player's name, but he got his head on the end of it. Really well-placed header to tie it up fairly late in the game. I agree, like based on what I did see, it looked like Cavalry was in the driver's seat. Stats seem to bear that out as well. No, it's probably the toughest road trip they do, right? All the way out to the East Coast. And they did have a couple of missing players. I believe Ali Musi is still unavailable. I noticed Cavalry, they did tweak the lineup quite a bit. Nico Moroniak got his first start of the season. Jack Barrett got his first game for Cavalry, which was kind of neat to see. Can't even remember the last time Marco Carducci wasn't in between the posts for Cavalry, but yeah, had a couple of new faces. And I don't know, like I said, I didn't watch the whole game, but I think they showed pretty well what they're capable of.
Yeah, I think there were positives to take from the game. Lucas Diaz showed he had another strong game, and he got the assist on the one Cavs goal, and it was nice to see Willie Accio put it in the back of the net, get his first goal of the year. So I think he's really, for whatever reasons, had a really slow start. So I don't know, maybe it's just me watching it on TV, but it almost seemed like you could see like relief on his face almost after he scored, just to have that sort of monkey off his back. So I think it's good. A couple players that I think were sort of identified as players that had slower starts in Diaz and Accio. It was nice to see them progress a bit more. It was a pretty unflashy, workmanlike, controlling effort, and they rotated the squad. And one thing I noticed in that match is Tobias Warshawski he did not make the trip. And I'm just presuming that was a rest thing. I don't think it was an injury thing. Ali Musi and Tom Field still out with injuries. And I think there's a chance they're going to be back for this game this upcoming weekend.
Mm-hmm. And last thing I'll kind of bring up as a talking point before we segue into this weekend's game is despite some squad rotation, Cavalry still hasn't generated a lot of U21 minutes, which is pretty much par for the course for Cavalry. They've never really been the CPL club that gets to that threshold quickly. But I think they're around 5th or 6th at the moment in the standings when it comes to U21 minutes generated.
I saw the stats on that earlier today, and I was surprised. Like, they don't have very many minutes, but they're 5th. Like, they have over how many matches is it now? 5 CPL matches. They've got 195 minutes, which puts them in 5th. There's certainly a bunch of teams that haven't really put in a lot of U21 minutes yet. But we spent a lot of time talking about that near the end of the year last year. But it tends to work itself out, I think. And once Male Henry gets back, you will be seeing more minutes, I would think. Although I gotta admit, I hope we're not like doing that analysis like we did last year in like the last few games of the year. How many minutes do they need?
Yeah.
It was okay, but I don't really know if I want to run those segments regularly again this year.
Yeah, no, I hear where you're coming from. So I guess we can segue to talk a little bit about this Saturday. They're taking on York United. I know neither of us will be able to make the game due to personal commitments this May long weekend, but you got to figure Cavalry always seems to have good games against York at Spruce Meadows. So it's 5th against 6th in the standings right now. I'm kind of anticipating a strong Cavalry performance personally.
I would think so. Like, I am the first to admit I've seen virtually nothing of York this year. I watched the last 10 minutes of that match against Valor a week or two ago, but I really haven't spent any significant amount of time watching them this year. But I haven't gotten the impression that they've made any huge leaps or any huge like steps backward either. So, they're always a decent enough side. But yeah, I agree. Usually Cavalry plays them pretty well at Spruce Meadows in a general sense.
Yeah, they've been really hot and cold based on their results. I mean, they lost to Atletico first game of the season, but then they lost 3-0 to Forge. But then they beat Vancouver FC 3-0. And then they lost to Forge 3-1. Then they lost to Pacific 2-0. And then they beat Valor 3-1. So they've had a couple of wins, but I wouldn't call the teams that they got those wins against title contenders. So they probably are a middle of the pack team. But yeah, you never really know what they're going to come up with. I do think York has some strong players in their lineup. And obviously, Martin Nash knows Cavalry probably better than most CPL coaches simply because he used to be a member of the coaching staff here. So should be an intriguing game. But as I mentioned, I'm kind of anticipating Cavalry to come out hot and take control of the game early on, have a lot of possession and generate a lot of chances. So I kind of am anticipating a Cavalry win, but
yeah, that's pretty much how I would look at it too. It does seem like York is kind of an all or nothing team this year. They're not a team that seems to have a lot of draws or anything like that. It's either they go out and have a really good game or they lose. Let's move on and talk about our interview for this week. This week we interviewed Lee Tucker, who is probably known to a lot of people as being a part of the Calgary Foothills staff, but today we interviewed him as being the head coach of the new high performance program that Alberta Soccer has set up.
Yeah, this is kind of like a select team that's competing in League One Alberta on the women's side. Definitely the youngest squad in the league, as far as I can tell. I mean, he talked about how the team even has some 2009 born players who would be 14 or 15. So it's kind of like a best of the best Alberta youth players all-star team, right? So, but they've already had a win, and he said that their first game was a good performance that just didn't end in a win. So, yeah, good to hear from him about this team, and based on performances thus far, they don't seem out of their depth at all. They seem like they're going to be right in the thick of things.
They are very young. Like, I actually went through the roster to really look, and from what I can tell, the two quote unquote senior members of the team right now would be Olivia Grisdale and Aja Turner, and they just graduate high school. They're both going on NCAA scholarships. I think they're the oldest players on the team, and they're just graduating from high school, and most of the players are younger than that.
Very good opportunity for these players to play at such a high level at such a young age. It'll do a lot for their development. But I'll let Lee Tucker kind of speak for that, and we'll run that interview now.
We'd like to welcome Lee Tucker to the podcast. Lee is the head coach of the Alberta High Performance Program, who is currently competing in League One Alberta this summer. Welcome to the podcast, Lee.
Thanks for having me, guys. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Lee. To start, can you provide us with a bit of background about what the Alberta High Performance Program is exactly and how it fits into the player development pathway?
Yeah, certainly. I would start by saying that the intent is to bring a national development centre to Alberta, and that's something that Alberta Soccer is working closely with Canada Soccer on to make that happen in the future. How it's sort of started right now is we run a process to identify players from throughout the province. They come into a training program currently twice per week. And then also we have the group competing in the Alberta League One this summer. So great opportunity to bring in some of the, I guess, high potential youth players, get them training together, like I say, a couple of times a week, and have them compete in high level games. As we move forward, we'd like to see that grow into that National Development Centre status and see us bring the fourth one into Alberta, because there are three currently, as I'm sure you're aware, one in BC, one in Ontario, one in Quebec. We certainly believe that there's enough talented players within this province to bring that opportunity to this province.
The high performance program is based out of Macron and is working closely with Foothills. What's the relationship there? Like, is it part of Foothills, or how is it separate? How is it intertwined?
Well, I think the key part is when you look at the pathways that have been forged within Alberta, we as in Foothills have our UWS team, which kind of sits at the top of the pathway right now. And obviously we're one of the founding franchises for the Project 8 Professional League that are launched next year. So we have the pathway in place as such to support the development of certainly all female players. But when you look at youth soccer players, in particular, it's key for those players to have access to pathways. From our point of view, we are supporting Alberta Soccer in delivering this program. And again, it's about providing opportunities for more players. We know that there's talented players throughout this province and have had the opportunity to see some of them, whether that's in our program or competing against our program, or like I stated before, about having opportunities within our UWS program. We know the talent is here, and so we almost have a bit of a responsibility to support Alberta Soccer with bringing this program to this province. So it's been a great starting point for us, and we're really excited to see where this all goes in the future.
Lee, I know you've mentioned the UWS team, which I know you're the head coach of as well. I'm curious, how will you balance the demands and responsibilities of high performance program with UWS? Like, is there a chance that the schedules might conflict with each other?
Do you know what? You might be surprised. There's very, very little conflicts. So, what's good is that from a League One perspective, we had access to that schedule in advance of our UWS schedule, actually. So then when we were working with the league, as in the UWS league, we were able to position things so that there are minimal conflicts. But also these are programs that are being run. It's not about, me per se. There's a group of coaches that are involved in both programs, and they're high level coaches, and it will ensure that both, a UWS program, an Alberta program, and even from my point of view, the club program, will receive the care and attention, if you like, that they all need. And it's important for us to build infrastructure, and that infrastructure is, yes, it's pathways, but it's also about people. And so that's something that we're very much focused on over the coming months.
So we've been talking about the big picture elements of the pathways and everything, but let's talk a little bit about some of the players that are actually on the roster here. So maybe we could even go through them, position by position, and just who's on this team. I know I've looked at the roster. I recognize some names, but why don't you break it down for us?
Yeah, sure. We currently on the group have 18 players on the roster, and there's two goalkeepers that are within that 18. One Emma Lynch and one Brianne Rioch. And so what's great there is you got two goalkeepers that are playing within the Alberta youth leagues that are challenging each other, and one's older than the other, so you get a bit of competitiveness in that respect. And both are very talented, and they're supported with our goalkeeper coach and goalkeeper program. So it's great to see that set up in practice. When we go across the back line, there is Clara Monk, who's one of our fullbacks, Amelia Shep, who's a centre back, Jenna McIntyre, centre back, You'll see Tora Betteridge, who can play centre-back, but also step into midfield as well. Fabi Zumwalt, who's our left full-back. Midfield, we've got quite a lot of options, actually, as to be expected. But Campbell Patterson goes into midfield with Olivia Grisdale, who's, along with Amelia, are the captains for this group. We have Tegan Stewart, Keelan Stewart, who are both attack-minded midfielders, sort of / wingers. Ashlyn Walia, who's one of the younger players. We have 3 2009-born players with this group. So that's Ashlyn. There's Ali Pazaka, who's one of the strikers, and Yvette Taraf, who's one of our wingers. Emma Nicholson, Asia Turner, who are 2 of our attacking players, so our number 10 and our number 9, along with Jordan James, who's also up as a 9, and Reese Hollingworth. So it's a good mix of age groups and an exciting group. And they've played 2 games so far in League One, and arguably should have won the first one, but lost out to Scottish on the night, and then had a great result this week against Callies.
Like you mentioned, a couple of 2009 born players on the roster. Definitely a younger outfit, I think, than the other League One teams this year. What is that like for the players who are, maybe only 15 or 16 to take on players who may be, 19, 20? How does that help their development? And what is that like for them? Is it a little daunting or is it exciting?
There's three 2009s. I would probably say, when you're talking about those types of feelings, it's all of those things, and that can change sometimes within the games, but certainly game to game. One of the comments that one of them made this week was about how much faster it is compared to when they play in their own age group. And so, just from their long-term development point of view, that's going to help them in terms of being able to process information faster and deal with pressure quicker and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's a great step in their development. It's a key part of the development, like I say, for the players across the city and the province. And hopefully what you'll see is actually in most, if not all, the League One teams, that you'll see players of this sort of age range getting that exposure, because it's only going to be better for the individuals long term.
The team is entered right now in League One Alberta. What are the goals for the team this year, and what would success look like by the end of July?
The goals that we've set really are, we want to be competitive in every game. We haven't talked about going out to win every game. And that's purposeful. This is about developing players and developing youth soccer players. So you might see us, at times overplay, if you like, in terms of possession, or, stick to a formation. That might be because it's a long-term plan and we're trying to impact certain pieces. But we're certainly going to put development first. However, like I say, we expect the team to be competitive in every game. And the early indications are that is going to be the case. Technically, there's some very, very good footballers in this group. Tactically, the group have a good level of understanding, but that's where we're going to push them a little harder. The probably one area where it will just take some time is just that physical side, which is absolutely fine. Some players can cope with that right now, and they might have the speed aspect, or they might be stronger in challenges, or whatever that might look like. But ultimately, the experience is going to be key for everyone. And then over the early weeks, one of the key parts that we need to try and do is try and create that culture piece as well, because you have players that are different ages and coming from different clubs, and we're asking them to go out and be as well organized and work together well as a team. And we've got some focus, or got to put some focus on that. But again, ultimately, it's going to be great for all of their individual development, and that is the key part of this program.
Awesomely. Last question from us is about the continuation of this program after the League One season, which is, of course, a very brief spring-summer season, partly to accommodate, a high number of university players who go back to their university programs.
Yeah,
season in early August. What does Alberta High Performance program look like in August or September or other months?
Yeah, well, like I said before, the intent is to bring a national development centre here to the province. And so If that license is granted, that's a full-time program, and that's certainly a future state for the program is to move into full-time and is to have a year-round program. And there's no date put on that yet, and that again is purposeful because it has to be the right timing, and we have to fulfill criteria. But certainly it's the start of a program, is what I would say, and with the level of talent that we have in this province, it's only going to go one direction. It's gonna be one of the best centres, if not arguably the best centre within Canada. How we get there is just slowly but surely making progress every season or every year, and again just bringing players in from around the province, building on the culture pieces, developing technically and tactically, and pushing these players through the pathway opportunities that we will have in this province. So what that looks like, when that sort of looks that way, that's I guess to be discovered as such. But there's lots of exciting things happening in the future, as we know.
Thanks very much for taking the time to talk with us and explain about these programs.
You're welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks to Lee Tucker for doing the interview today. And it was interesting to hear a little bit more about this program, because when I was trying to put everything together for our League One Alberta preview episodes, I didn't really have much knowledge in advance about who was sort of in charge of this team. But I found out after we did those preview episodes that Lee was involved. So I'm kind of glad we got a chance to sort of nail down and get an update on that final program on the women's side for League One Alberta this year.
Yeah. And as you mentioned before we ran that interview, Lee Tucker is also heavily involved with Foothills, and he's the head coach of Foothills WFC, Calgary's United Women's Soccer team, who are going to be kicking off their season quite soon. And I know that we'll be running another interview with him to talk about that program next week.
For sure. Next week, we will talk about UWS as their season is going to begin. But before we wrap things up, do you want to talk about League One Alberta a little bit? We haven't had a chance to see too much as far as going to matches yet between the two of us. But just from what you've read and what you've seen, any particular thoughts so far?
Seems like the Edmonton teams are off to a hot start. In the women's side, St. Albert Impact are 2-0. Calgary Blizzard are 1-0. And then Callies United on the women's side, they started their season with a loss, and then same for Foothills. And then on the men's side, kind of similar, actually. It looks like Edmonton Scottish are leading the way after 2 match days. They're 2 for 2. They've won both of their games, 6 goals for and 3 goals against. Cavalry FC U21 there in second place at the moment with a win and a loss. So still very early days, but looks like Edmonton has gotten off to a good start in both divisions.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about Edmonton Scottish is I believe last year they were far in the back. I think they took up the basement on the men's side last year. And so they've obviously made some pretty substantial improvements to what they're doing. And yeah, good for them.
Yeah, and I'll just highlight an upcoming match, May 21st at 8 p.m. So next week, Calgary Blizzard will be taking on Cavalry FC U21, 8 p.m. at the Calgary West Soccer Center. So that could be a good one to look out for. That Definitely. Would be Tuesday night, right? Tuesday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast using all the usual podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com. It explains how to subscribe using those apps and other apps. And you also have the ability to leave a question or comment. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.